Introduction to Existentialism. Existentialism is a major philosophy of the 20th century. Where am I going? What am I doing? What is the meaning of life? Existential crisis. Existentialism is a philosophy which deals with the problem of freedom. A lot of people think freedom is a good thing, but it also could be a bad thing. It also deals with the lack of meaning in purpose in life and the loneliness of human existence. So, just letting you know on the front end, I'm not saying existentialism is a great philosophy. It's one of the major philosophies of 20th century. It can be a little bit depressing. Some see it as a life is meaningless, what's the point philosophy, where other people, especially some kids, see it as almost an empowering philosophy. So we will see where you each fall. So after World War II in Europe, not only did a generation of men, Europeans, die in World War II, but the countries themselves were physically destroyed, so there were no jobs. It was a crazy, tough time to be alive in Europe or anywhere. And that is when existentialism began showing up as a philosophical and literary movement in the 1940s. Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. That concept we'll come back to. Existentialism is a literary movement, meaning books including fiction books, and a philosophical movement which says that we as humans get to decide our own meaning in life, and we're forced to try to make decisions that are logical, that make sense, in a world that makes no sense, that can drive someone crazy. It focuses on the feeling that there is no purpose or explanation to reality, to the meaning of life, that we have to create it on our own. So some different existentialist classics, books from Kafka and Nietzsche, who we'll cover next week. Jean-Paul Sartre, No Exit, we'll talk later about. Kierkegaard, Albert Camus' The Stranger is one of my favorite books growing up. And Fight Club. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen the film Fight Club. It's an existentialist story. Freedom. Freedom, it's something we all want, but with that freedom, it's a heavy weight. Existentialists say we are entirely free. That's a great thing. But with that, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. And with this responsibility comes angst, anguish, dread. These are all words that mean you're not very happy. It's the pressure. It's the lack of peace of mind. It's the anxiety. Existentialists say we have to focus on our personal responsibility because otherwise we need to rise above this absurd condition. Absurd means it doesn't make sense, meaning it's just, if you really look at it, we're born, we struggle, then we suffer, then we die. That's not too pleasing. They say we need to come up with our own meaning of life in between all of that other stuff. Big ideas of existentialism. Coming from Jean-Paul Sartre, existence precedes essence. Okay, you might remember earlier in the year we covered Aristotle. Aristotle said that everything that is has an essence about it. In other words, there's a destiny, meaning a bird is destined to fly or you're destined to be a lawyer or a janitor. Existentialists disagree with this. They say that first you exist and then you get to find your own direction in life. It's not like you're born and now you're going to be a cafeteria worker, that was your destiny. But they put the freedom and the responsibility on you to find what is going to be the nature of your existence. We cannot be restricted by what society thinks is happy, because this is going to limit our own individual freedom to independently exist. Societal forces, family forces are strong. I know you all want to look like homeless people with ripped jeans and wear purple shirts that say pink, because that brings you a little feeling of peace of mind that you fit in. And that conformity is you basically giving up your own view subconsciously and going after what other people accept. That's fine, but existentialism and Sartre in particular will deal with that a little bit later. What do we mean by saying that existence precedes essence? We mean that man first of all exists, then encounters himself. That means you figure yourself out. And then you surge up in the world and define yourself afterward. Bob Dylan, the great 1960s singer, life isn't about finding yourself or finding anything. It's about creating yourself. It comes from within, not external forces. Belief number one of existentialism, the idea of absurdism, something that's absurd. It doesn't make sense. Nothing can explain our lives. There's no answer to why. We exist in an irrational universe that really doesn't make sense, and when we try to bring order to this universe, we just become more frustrated and more confused. Absurdism, or being absurd, is the conflict between our tendency to try to find value and meaning and then the actuality that we'll never be able to find it. That's just absurd. We're chasing our own tail. Number two, alienation or estrangement. These paintings that I have in this PowerPoint really do illustrate a lot of these existentialist views. The girl on the left, she's sitting right next to a guy, I guess, but the look in her eyes, even though she's physical proximity to someone else, she's alone. And that's the nature of our society. We often feel alone from all other humans. We feel alone from our jobs. We're just a little tiny cog in a big machine. And we often feel alienation and estrangement from whatever we dealt with in our past and what we're going to have to deal with in our future. I think we all, from time to time, have felt sort of alone in the universe. That alienation, welcome to existentialism population, 1. Society itself and history shows that our culture can be slightly alienating as well. If you look at it, telephones and technology are great, but we don't tend to be with people now. We tend to be with screens. We live in an age where things are more impersonal. Back in the day as a teacher, if I finished a few minutes early, kids would start talking. Now, 25 kids stare at a device and they talk to each other via a cell phone. It really is a society that's pulled us away from one another. And often the jobs that we work are just repetitive, brain-numbing jobs which ultimately really don't give us any reward and makes us realize that we are just a cog in a machine. We're not part of our own selves. We're part of society. Third big theme in existentialism is freedom. Choice and commitment. We have freedom to choose. Thank God we have freedom to choose. Every teenager, or most teenagers, can't wait to have their own place and put the posters up where they want and leave the toothpaste lid cap off or whatever. But with this freedom comes a lot of choice. We have the choice to create our own lives the rest of your life. Will it be average or will it be memorable? That's going to be up to you. You're going to make that choice. And when we have to choose, we have to accept the risk and the responsibility for what's going to happen. If you choose to never take the risk and you're going to hug the tree your whole life, you will never reach the sweetest fruit that you get when you go out on a limb. That's the risk reward that everybody makes. With freedom comes a lot of angst and responsibility. The famous painting The Scream. A human being is absolutely free and absolutely responsible. Anguish is the result. You'll want to have your own apartment, but then when something goes wrong in the apartment and you can't just call mommy or daddy or grandpapa to help you out because it's now your responsibility. Having to make these choices for yourself is scary. Is freedom good or bad? If we were in the classroom, we would have a big discussion on this. And it's interesting. Different classes definitely spin different ways. Everybody wants to be free. Nobody or very few people can handle the responsibility that comes with it. Theme number 4, dread and anxiety. Anxiety, something which unfortunately many people in today's society deal with. Where does it come from? It comes from our understanding that the freedom we have, that we have to face every moment, comes with the fact that what matters. Like when you really sit down late at night, or maybe you sit in the roof of your car and you're staring up at the moon, that, feeling of like, what is this? That anxiety, am I doing it enough? Am I doing it right? Should I be doing something else? Existential angst comes when we realize we have to make important decisions. Seniors, are you going to be in the job force? Are you going to be in the college? Are you going to go in the military? If you go to a job, what are you going to study? What college are you going to go to? How are you going to pay for this? How are you going to get to the college when you have no money to pay for this? These problems, these decisions we have to face, and then we realize we have no freaking idea what we're doing. We have no understanding of how to make the right decision. Angst and anxiety is the negative feeling when we realize the experience of freedom and responsibility we have. If you just went with the flow and didn't sweat those details, no worries, no stress, but are you really making any choices? Maybe you are, but this nature of anxiety is increasing every year, many, many times over, in my opinion, and with the lockdown, even more so. So, in terms of existentialists, there's a number of famous ones. This is Soren Kierkegaard. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. I see a lot of that in recent times. The two different types of existentialists. First, you have the religious ones. There aren't many. Kierkegaard's the main one. He says God does exist, but we're alienated from him. He's not looking down on us, and we're not really connected with him. And then the other existentialists, generally speaking, are atheists. They don't believe in God. And therefore, if we don't believe in God, we better accept responsibility for what we become. And this is important because, and not making any sort of view or viewpoint on religion shouldn't be a bigger role, but religion was a bigger role 20 years ago, and obviously going back farther than that, it took even a bigger role. If your whole life was dictated by beliefs that came from the Bible and God, then that faith allowed you to kind of go along. In other words, your boat has somebody steering it. Well, if you don't believe in God, and religion obviously is less important in many people's lives, then what is steering your boat? What faith do you have to rely upon? That's where a lot of the existentialist angst comes from. So famous existentialists, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Sartre. By the way, some people say Sartre, some people say Sartre. I tend to go back and forth. Albert Camus. And then you got Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir is our only woman philosopher, or one of two women philosophers we cover. It's not because I'm a misogynist, it's because society is. Culturally, women weren't really allowed to have views. In fact, Simone de Beauvoir is really well known. A lot of her views were going along with her partner, Jean-Paul Sartre. So some of her views were actually given by the man instead of her. One view she brought forth, and I think it's important to reference, she wrote a book called The Second Sex, which is very important in the women's liberation movement later on. But the concept, a woman is not born, she is created. If you think about this, when you find out you're pregnant and you find out the sex of the child and you buy a bunch of little baby blue things or you buy a bunch of pink things, it depends on the sex of the child. So that child is born and she's a female and her room is full of pink things and there's lots of dolls and dresses and pigtails in the lot. Simone de Beauvoir said society has created that. And it's brainwashed or indoctrinated or conditioned, however you want to say it, the girl to become a quote-unquote girl in the eyes of society. This is not allowed. I mean, there are girls who are tomboys who reject that. Society now has obviously changed from when she was writing, but the idea that society itself creates the idea of women, and then women are expected to follow along with that. Why do women have to wear makeup on their face? They're not in the circus. Why do women have to wear high-heeled torture device shoes? And most people say, well, that's normal. Well, women had to wear corsets, metal bars bringing their midsections in so they could have curvy hourglass figures. These are all from society, not from being a woman in the traditional sense. Albert Camus was a writer. He died young, but his work is very important in existentialism. You will never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. I'm sure some of you can connect with this because I had many kids tell me when they finally give up one day and they say, I'm done with boys, or when they finally stop searching for happiness, that's when happiness unexpectedly knocks on its door. It has to do with expectations and what you think happiness is, that you think happiness can be found outside of your body, when in fact happiness only comes from a mindset of within. The Myth of Sisyphus, one of the more famous works of Camus, it has personal significance to me, and I think it's very applicable in modern society. It goes back to a Roman or Greek myth. Sisyphus had pissed off the gods, he made some deal, he went back on it, and the gods are getting their revenge. They have punished him. He is now on this mountain face, and he has an enormous boulder, and his job is to push the boulder up the mountain. Forever. And he moves this boulder up the mountain, and it gets to the top, and then it rolls back upon him. And he goes back to the bottom, and he starts again. Nothing ever comes of his work. All day long, he pushes the boulder up the mountain, and it just rolls back upon him. This is really relatable in many people's lives. Anybody who has a mortgage or a job who believes the TGIF mindset, they're working usually not for the love of the work, but to pay bills, because that's what we do. Others, in my medical situation, I keep pushing the boulder up the hill, and I hope it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And here's where Camus goes with it. He says you have a choice. If you are pushing the boulder up the mountain, you can become depressed and give up and let the boulder roll upon you, killing you. Or you can choose a different view. You could say your existence is meaningless and just give up. Camus says the struggle itself towards the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Meaning, it's kind of badass heroic that he continues to push that boulder up the hill. He could give up, but he basically is giving a middle finger at the gods and laughing as he continues to do what he needs to do. He puts his nose to the grindstone, and he continues to work. And Camus says, if we imagine Sisyphus happy, it's a whole different mindset. It's not that he's destined to be tortured. It's that no matter what you throw at him, he will achieve. And Camus basically encapsulated it. Life is absurd. It doesn't make sense. But we have a choice in how we approach it. That's the only choice we ever have, is how we approach the waves of life. Soren Kierkegaard, the one religious existentialist. Life must be lived forwards, but it can only be understood backwards. When we look back at all of the mistakes or all the things we learned, 20/20 hindsight, meaning you can have a lot better vision once the occasion has gone. I see it all perfectly, Soren Kierkegaard says. There are two possible situations. You can do either this or that. My honest opinion and my friendly advice is this. Do it or do not do it. You will regret both. This is unfortunately true if you've ever had a tough decision to make. No matter what decision you make, there's part of you who's kicking yourself and wishing you made the other. Even when you buy the thing, the first time you ever buy your new car, and you shop around and you go and you get a good deal on your cherry red car, and you're all excited and you're driving home, and you will be full of what's called post-purchase dissonance. Meaning, what the frick did I just do? Should I have done that? Life has that way of no matter what we choose, we regret. We wonder if we're doing it right or if we did the right thing. Kierkegaard tried to take a different viewpoint of this phenomena. Wow, I haven't felt anxious in ages. Something's not right here. No, stop. You can't get anxious over not feeling anxious. Or can I? And that's the problem. Kierkegaard said anxiety is natural. Stop being afraid of being anxious. You're going to be anxious. The only way you won't be anxious if you have no freedom. If you're locked here somewhere without choice, you're going to be full of different emotions, but you have no choice. That's part of being human, and when you accept it, it goes away a little bit. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. All of you, I bet, who want your own apartment or your house away from mom or dad, you're looking forward to that moment, but with that moment, you're going to be full of more internal angst and dizziness because now you have the choice. It's a double-edged sword. It has positives and it has negatives. Kierkegaard said anxiety is essential for creating ourselves. If you didn't have anxiety, you wouldn't be creating yourselves. I don't know if that's true, but I think, a lot of choices are easy, but every once in a while we have a tough choice, and I bet a lot of you freeze and you procrastinate and you don't want to deal with that tough choice. The anxiety comes when you realize we're free and the choices never ends. And while that seems good, to some, it's not so good. How to be an existentialist, or how to get real, get a grip, and stop making excuses. Now, this is the part of existentialism that isn't all depressing, but rather it's a self-help, kick yourself in the ass, let's make something of yourself philosophy. Because it is possible to creating oneself, willing to be oneself, you're going to have anxiety. One would have no anxiety if there was no possibility whatsoever. So the famous example that he gave is standing on top of a cliff. I had this very experience years ago at a Yankee game. In the top row, I'm fearful of heights. We were in the upper deck. I had the front seat, and I had two different types of fear. Now, the first fear is the fear of falling. No, I'm not going to be pushed. No, my friend I don't think is going to push me off the upper deck. But I have fear of heights, so I'm fear of falling. But there's a second fear that people don't want to talk about. And it's not a suicidal fear. It's the fear that, holy crap, I could jump off right now. If you've ever been at a subway as a subway went by, you could be the happiest person in the world, but you could literally flex your quads and calves and jump in front of that subway. You never would, but that fear that you have that freedom to do it, that is where the anxiety can come. You realize there's a dizziness to having that freedom, that it's scary of how much of a role you truly do play in your lives. Most people don't want to deal with this. Most people close their eyes and sleepwalk through life, but realize your life is made up of the choices you make. The only intelligent, tactical response to life's horror is to laugh defiantly at it. I'm sure a lot of you have had this morning. You woke up late, the alarm didn't wake up, you stubbed your toe, broke your nail, you went into the shower, no more hot water, your car had a flat tire, you got to Best Eden or Baker's Dozen to get your coffee, and then the coffee spilled on you, and you drove into school, and then somebody hassled you, and just as you got to your locker, the day never gets better. And at some point, when the 19th bad thing in a row happens, you have a choice. I'm going to punch the wall because by breaking my hand, I will teach the world. Or you just laugh at how frickin' stupid this all is. I'm like, are you serious? That laughing defiantly is accepting that sometimes life is absurd. You can't control what you can't control, but come on. That's a viewpoint we can gain according to Kierkegaard. We need to have humor in the absurdity of it all. Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. It's up to you to give life meaning. This quote was early in the PowerPoint, and I'm reading it again because it's so important. The word condemned is a word we use in regards to being condemned to prison. And ultimately, our lives, we didn't ask to be born, but yet we're born into situations and we have to deal with it. Sartre said we better pull on the big boy pants and realize we have to give our lives meaning. Authenticity versus bad faith, concept that Sartre introduced, which I think is pretty interesting. Authentic is being real, it's being genuine. It's realizing that we have the responsibility for our own life. We have the responsibility to create ourselves. Our lives have no value other than the value we give our lives. If your value is going to be being a great mom or dad and raising kids who are happy and healthy, that's a value. If your value is to never get married and to never have kids, but to do something to save the world via science, that's a meaning. We choose that on our own. Now, how to tell if someone's fake, because Most people are not authentic. In Sartre's view, most people act in what he calls bad faith. He said, we're living a phony life, and I apologize for how this is going to hit a lot of you. We're living a phony life when all we do is try to live up to other people's expectations. The sad fact that most of us are just trying to make mom or dad or grandpa happy, to make somebody proud of us, to achieve goals so that others look upon us pleasing because we don't look upon ourselves as being pleasing. This phony life means, in his opinion, that we have something called bad faith. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. That's the first principle of existentialism. So the opposite of authenticity is to be acting in bad faith. Bad faith means you believe you have no other choice but to do what you're doing. You think you're stuck there. You assume you have no freedom to control our lives, and you give in to external circumstances. You make excuses for why you're not doing what you want to do. When you act in bad faith, you deny your choices and you remain shackled or chained up to the world that you've created in your minds. An example will do a better job of explaining this. People act in bad faith because they're letting other people decide what they want their lives to be. Now, maybe all of you like purple shirts that say pink and you want to wear pants that are ripped, but do you really want that? You subconsciously just want to be accepted and loved, and apparently you have to dress like a homeless person in regards to your pants in order to get that conformity and that acceptance. Are you acting in bad faith by wearing that clothing? Yeah, kind of, but you don't realize. Unless you're one of those people who says, I'm going to change my style, and to change my style, I'm going to dress the uniform of somebody who has the style I want to become. That's bad faith. Bad faith is pretending you're not free when you know you are. It's believing that the external factors, the woe is me, is keeping you where you are. Now, granted, your family might not have been the greatest thing. You may have had a dysfunctional thing. Maybe bad luck and bad fate has hit you. But you know what? Ultimately, at some point, you can stand up and move on. If you don't, you're acting in bad faith and you're accepting the role of the person who's had life trample on them. And woe is me. The best example that Sartre gives is the waiter. The waiter is someone who is just doing his role. He's no longer a human. He's just a waiter. Now, unfortunately, any job you have, there's responsibilities of ways you're supposed to act. I, as a teacher, have to do certain things. But the question I ask myself, am I simply being a teacher, and that's my role, or am I being myself within that teacher role? In other words, only you can answer if you think I'm genuine or authentic, but I choose to live my life my way, not necessarily the way that's dictated by society. Hell as other people will be the final concept, and one of the most important concepts that we will talk about all year from Jean-Paul Sartre. So hell as other people is the idea of being judged. You walk into a room of people you don't know, everybody turns, looks at you, and they laugh. And you immediately think, oh my God, they're talking about my big forehead, or my weird teeth, or the fact my left leg is longer than my right leg. Do we know what they're talking about? Do we know if they're even talking about us? And if they are talking about us, do we know? Maybe they're saying, oh my God, look at that guy. He must have great smelling breath. Do we really know what other people are thinking? Well, the other and the other people, that's the hell. He says we can really only know ourselves by thinking about how we think we are viewed by others. If you're homeschooled and you crack lots of jokes and grandma and grandpa laugh all the time and say you're the next Bob Hope or Jim Carrey, those are comedians, you think you're a funny dude. And then you go to school for the first time with kids and you crack some of your cheeseball jokes and everybody looks at you like you're not funny. And then you realize I'm not funny. Well, the only thing that changed was the other people and their opinions. Sartre said that why we make others so important to us, they become our distorted mirror. We don't figure out who we are without them. And so we don't even know what they think, but if they do, especially in high school or school, if they're mean to us, they become the source of our distress. that they, by judging us, are telling us who we are, that they somehow have that power. Must do better, rubbish, dreadful, awful. We live a life where we're always trying to please others rather than pleasing ourselves, and then we wonder why we're not happy. Because we can never please others in our minds, and if we're never trying to please ourselves, well, I think that speaks for itself. When we think about ourselves, when we try to know ourselves, we use the knowledge of which other people already have. Into whatever I say about myself, someone else's judgment always enters. Into whatever I feel within myself, someone else's judgment enters. We are only able to know ourselves through what we think others think. This other is the hell. That I can think I'm a good person and then think of the one person who doesn't like me, and that will make me question everything. I love this, one of my favorite concepts, Jack Kornfield, Buddhist teacher. The fear of being judged by others as not being good enough actually hides the fact that we are judging ourselves in that very moment. If we accept with open arms what we are and what we do, no judgment from another person will make a difference. I think that's truly telling, because if you walk into the room thinking that they're thinking about your weird mongoloid left ear, when in fact you're probably the only person who knows you have a misshapen left ear, that's your own self-esteem criticizing you, not the others. And finally, leaving off with the Soren Kierkegaard idea, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Many people go through life with anxiety and dread and anguish and all of the things we've talked about, but that's just your mind wishing life was a certain way. If you realize the next step you take is the first step on whichever direction you're going. And life can be full of flowers, or life can be full of thorns. It's up to you to determine that through your actions. Make sure to write journals, and I will see you soon.